Hello, and welcome everybody to another episode of Pod Strickland. I'm your host, Shwin and Stacy. In this episode 357, I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Stacy. That is at StacyPat89 on Twitter. Stacy, how are you doing on this rather frigid Tuesday morning?
Victory Tuesday. Only one game I watched yesterday that I can recall, so doing pretty well.
Yes, I think you probably blacked out until like 11 p.m. yesterday.
Yeah. I don't know what happened before that. So
totally believe you. And we are joined, not a first-time guest, but a first time in a long time. His name is Ariel Pacheco. You can follow him on Twitter at @PachecoNBA. Ariel, how are you doing today?
Doing good. I can't complain. Not an Eagles fan like Stacy, so I think I'm doing better than you.
Yeah, I think you are. I think anybody that's not an Eagles fan is doing better than they are today. That was. I'm not gonna like belabor the point, but the funniest thing about that game is that DK Metcalf literally did nothing. He did fucking nothing the entire game, and then on the last drive was like, "Well, I guess I'll just fucking turn it on right now."
Yeah, it was like the literal embodiment of that time he ran back to like force the fumble.
Well, the funny thing, so I was in my fantasy football playoffs was like started, right? So it was in the quarterfinal, and I needed like 2 points yesterday, and I had him and I had Goddard, and like Goddard gets 2 catches on the first drive, so I'm like down 0.1 points. These two guys did nothing. They did nothing until the third quarter, and so I'm just sitting there being like, am I really gonna lose this because the fucking Eagles don't throw to anybody anymore other than AJ Brown and Devontae Smith, and because DK Metcalf decided to like take the night off? But then Goddard caught a pass which was actually like a 3-yard loss that put me over the top.
Fucking screen passes. No, for me it was even worse. I had Kenneth Walker, and I was facing AJ Brown, and I didn't think I had the Chargers defense. I forgot to sub out Christian Watson. I had a disaster week. I lost by 2 points, and like at the end of the game, I was like, all right, if Kenneth Walker scores here, I win. But the Eagles lose, so I got the worst of both worlds, right? Like the Eagles still lost, and of course they threw it to fucking the other former rival, I guess. And so worst of all worlds. But hey, the Knicks saved the night. So
yes, the Knicks did save the night, and we're going to talk about that. Before we get started, I need to make a few announcements. The first being that the Strickland has an Instagram. Check that out. That is at the Strickland on Instagram. Posting all kinds of new content on there. The Strickland also has a YouTube channel where you may be watching this podcast. If you are not done so already, please hit like and then subscribe to the channel. That'd be a huge help to us. Maybe even leave us a comment. The Strickland also has merchandise. I'm wearing some of it. You can find that. That's on our website at www.thestrick.land. There's a link that'll take you to the merchandise store, and you can find all kinds of cool stuff: t-shirts, sweatshirts, hats, coffee mugs, water bottles, you name it, we've got it. And finally, the Strickland has a Patreon, which you can subscribe to. There are a number of different tiers. There's a $6 tier that gets you access to Pod Strickland's podcast that I host every Friday with Prize. You also get access to Takes from Obvious Bozos, our newest podcast, hosted by Andrew Steele, a.k.a. Doug, along with Zach Blatter. You also get access to the Strickland Discord, where the conversation never stops. There are further tiers. There's a $9 tier that gets you access to Strickland Roll, my solo pod where I rant and rave about the Knicks even more. You also get access to wonderful premium articles by Matthew Marino, one of the best in the business. And now you get access to Strictly NFL, which, you guessed it, is our newest podcast, which is about the NFL. That is hosted by Constantine Metricos and Jeffrey Rasmussen. There are further tiers. There's a $15 tier, $30 tier, $50 tier, and $100 tier. This comes with a variety of additional benefits, like listening on pod recordings, merchandise discounts, and even potentially co-hosting a podcast alongside yours truly, whether you choose to subscribe or not. It must be possible without you. And none of this would be possible without Bet Online. All the major sports are in action this week with the college football playoffs ready to kick off. Bet Online is your number one destination for all your sports wagering info, including news for pro football, the NBA, upcoming fights, and NHL games of the season. Head to the website today to get into the action and see all the updated odds for the week. Remember to use promo code BLEAV, BLEAV, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, where the game starts. It's funny. You mentioned the screen passes that the Eagles were throwing yesterday. And I saw, I don't know who it is, it might be Shane Half on Twitter. He was like highlighting it because he's like, look, Devontae Smith tries to block, but he can't fucking block on these plays. And they just keep getting blown up. And I saw that, this morning while I was taking my morning crap, and I immediately thought to myself, "Wow, that's kind of like starting Jericho Sims at center," because Jericho Sims can do like he. I actually think he's. I genuinely lose. I think that he looks like not an NBA player right now playing with that starting lineup because his weaknesses are actually exacerbated by everything that's kind of happening in that lineup right now, with Grimes also missing time, and the fact that, quite honestly, Brunson and Randle, obviously his effort wanes and waxes and wanes, but Brunson, whether his effort is there or not, he's always going to be somewhat of a minus. You have to cover for these guys. RJ is playing better defensively this year, but he's not somebody who's going to play above the scheme. So he's just going to execute his role, and that's about it. But you're not getting help from anybody really. And it's like, it's frustrating because obviously I think, look, he's a very athletic guy. And I think if you played him off the bench, a lot of his weaknesses would be mitigated, and he could probably be a lot more aggressive in terms of blitzing, switching, all that type of stuff. And that's just not available to him in the starting lineup. So, look, he gets hurt on literally the first play of the game on the fucking jump ball. He goes out early, and I'm not trying to shit on him, but that probably saved the game for the Knicks because there's no way they win this game with Jericho Sims playing his normal center rotation minutes. And Isaiah Hartenstein was an absolute monster last night.
MVP of the game? Is it fair to say? Or for the Knicks?
It was him. For me, it was either him or Randle because, and I know Brunson closed out the game well, and I know Quickley was huge, but I thought both those guys played that game was. I know the Knicks got more free throws than the Lakers. I think they shot 10 more. So this might seem like, oh, you're just saying this because the Knicks got a better result. No, I genuinely thought that this is one of the best officiated games I've watched this year. I thought they let them play through most of the appropriate contact, aside from that bullshit ass Austin Reeves and one he got in the fourth quarter. But I had no problem with. I thought this game was played extremely physically on both ends. Inside, and I thought they let them play that way. And once you you need guys that can match that. And I thought Hartenstein and I thought Randle and Josh Hart, for that matter, were really physical right from the start of the game. And they matched kind of the energy that LA was bringing initially. And look, Julius Randle, he got 4 stitches at halftime on his lip. Isaiah Hartenstein probably got elbowed in the face 15 times. I think Brunson got knocked right underneath his right eye also. So they really it wasn't just it wasn't just an effort thing. They really were in a battle, and those two dudes were awesome. So yeah, I mean, if you want to say Hartenstein, just kind of given the circumstances, sure. I think Julius Randle played something like 43 minutes in this game. He played what felt like the entire first half. I think he sat for 2 minutes or so.
Tibbs
it was a weird thing.
You had to, because you can't put hard on LeBron.
It was also a weird thing because Sims getting hurt meant Hartenstein had to come in earlier, and then he had to mess around with the fucking he was like, okay, is Todd just gonna play now? And I didn't really there are a lot of times I'll kill Tibbs for
was Todd Gibson gets minutes on the New York Knicks in 2023-24 on your bingo card, or
kind of, maybe.
Yeah.
Once he was
I know he already got minutes in the previous game.
Once he was a free agent, I was kind of like,
it was a matter of when, not if, at that point.
One last ride, Taj.
Until next year. But yeah, look, I just thought this was such an awesome win for them as a team, individually. Obviously, everybody in some way contributed. And they've had 2 wins on this road trip that, look, they're obviously not at 100% without Mitch. I think they're still kind of finding their defensive identity, whatever you want to call it. They've had some really, they lost by 20 to the Clippers. They've had some big time losses to some of the better teams in the league. But I think on this road trip, the win against Phoenix and the win, especially last night, these are 2 wins that I thought they had to really dig deep to get these wins in the way they did. And that's the resilience that you're kind of you became accustomed to last year from seeing from this team, and you're kind of like, I don't know, are they like? But seeing these two games on the West Coast trip and the way they responded, right? You lose a really disappointing game to Utah, you bounce back, you beat Phoenix, you lose, kind of. I mean, it was not a pretty uncompetitive game against the Clippers for the last half of it, and then you bounce back, you beat the Lakers. 2-2 on this road trip, like, yeah, it's annoying to lose that Utah game, but you told me 2-2 for the road trip. I think everybody would have been like, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, I didn't see them winning that Suns game. I do want to shout out the narrative that was spouted was the Knicks never have the best player on the floor. They lack star power. During a stretch where they were giving up multiple 140-point games, that's all we heard about. And so what I'm going to say is this: Anthony Davis was a monster in the paint, and everyone was. I mean, that's just a bad RJ matchup. He is a paint-centric guy against a guy who's just it's not much you can do with Anthony Davis. But there was one guy who was relentlessly hitting floaters. He had that one crazy right-handed finish. I don't know if you remember from the first half. Brunson did on AD in the air. And I think it's worth saying this. And you'll appreciate this, Shwin. He wasn't afraid of the Shogun, but the Shogun was afraid of him. Maybe that was the problem. And Brunson deserves that shout out. I think it was a team effort. On the first watch, I wasn't as impressed with the defense as most people were. I thought they still gave up 41 3-pointers. It's fair to say, and the Lakers missed some good looks. The Knicks have definitely been due for a team not shooting the lights out, and they've definitely been due for Turian Prince not shooting the lights out. So I'll definitely take that after last year. But on the rewatch, a lot of the buckets they were getting were just Bron being Bron and AD being AD. There's they built the wall, and Bron was he's able to score there, right? There's I think to your point, I think there was a concerted effort not to foul. I think they were willing to let other guys beat them. They're going to beat the wall, but they're going to make the wall. But they wanted to stay out of foul trouble, not just to avoid putting LeBron and AD on the line, but once you get into the penalty, right? Now Austin Reeves is getting to the line. Now Prince is getting to the line. And those guys' efficiencies are going to be much better if they have to actually, get points that way. So I thought that was a concerted effort. The effort in general was way better. The effort in general was better from everyone to a man. I thought Randle played one of his better defensive games. I'm a little bit, I don't want to say concerned. What worries me during the Mitch stretch is that, they're still they're not going to be locked down on defense. And you did need 39 minutes from Hartenstein. You did need everyone locked in. And that's what Tibbs has been great at throughout his career, is getting guys to really lock in on defense, especially, and play every night. That's how the Knicks have quote unquote overachieved in the eyes of the media, because despite having quote unquote no star, right? And I thought that, and what is, I don't want to say concerning, but how much can you rely on that, especially now that you're shorthanded, especially guys like Hart have been banged up here and there, right? Now you really only have one guy who can play significant minutes at center. I disagree a little. I don't want to say I disagree, Shwin. I definitely think Sims' play warrants criticism. I do think if he just doesn't start, if he's not playing against Anthony Davis or Giannis or those guys, I think he's playable. But I think the concern is and the reality is this: the schedule is tough. I mentioned this a bunch. Until you get to mid-February, coincidentally, when Mitch comes back, if they can just tread water, stay a few games over 500, I think Knicks fans are going to have to be patient like that. And that means it's one game they're going to be like, yeah, we beat the Lakers. The next game we gave up 150 to the Clippers. You're going to have those swings. But I just think that's kind of what you have to expect, at least until the schedule opens up and Mitch gets back. And the only thing I really am worried about is one, there's just the defense can only be so good missing their best player. And two, is it going to take its toll having to come up with this kind of effort consistently?
Yeah, and just last thing on that. Also, just needs to be said. If you want to give Hartenstein the game MVP because he kind of stepped into the void and elevated his game against a really, really tough matchup. Anthony Davis has been playing awesome, and he was awesome last night. Sure. But Julius Randle was the best player on the floor last night, probably. Like, I
In
genuinely
a game
believe
with
that.
LeBron and Anthony
Yeah.
Davis.
Yeah, he was probably the best player on the floor. He hit the
And they
biggest
didn't
shot of
play
the game.
poorly. They didn't.
No,
They
and
played. Well, yeah.
No, they played. They wanted to win that game. You could tell they were like, that was not like you caught LeBron and AD on a night where they maybe stayed out at the club too long last night or something. They were trying to win that game. And Randall hit the biggest shot of the game over AD, which was a ridiculous shot from the corner. He also came up with that fucking tie up on LeBron, which was insane. Like, that was a crazy play.
I'm surprised he got that call at the Staples Center too, right? Normally it's a foul.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. I thought that, and I think it was the right call. I don't think he fouled him. I think he legit grabbed the ball and it was tie up. I thought, like, again, that's they officiated the game really well. But like, he was. You're not going to get a lot of nights where I think, like, I'll say this, like, there was a couple possessions to start the game where Julius on defense was just like standing there. But like, really, aside from that, you're not going to get many nights where the effort is like this, and not just from him, from any player. So that was a tremendous performance by Julius Randle, and considering how much I've killed him, I think it's only fair to point out when he plays like that. And I do think that the short mid-range stuff that he's kind of cashing in on right now, this feels like the best version of, like, we've seen all these various versions of Julius Randle. This feels like the one that's best, and also maybe the one that gives him the best chance to translate his game into the playoffs. I'm curious about what you think about that, Ariel.
Yeah, he's been really like imposing as well, just in his style of play. That short mid range you mentioned, like yesterday, he had like a pretty like nasty floater, and he pulled that out of the bag, and I was like, oh, that's impressive. And it was like over Anthony Davis too. You mentioned that like, yeah. You mentioned that like it's like different versions of Randall. I feel like at the start of like every season, he kind of just like spins a wheel, and he's like, yeah, this is who I'm going to be this year. It's kind of wild, but I think overall the team
spin and it lands on be an asshole. I think we're okay.
It's like a 1 in 10 chance of it hitting. But I think that like overall you guys all touched on like really good points, especially like the thing with Sims, where I think when you start him instead of like bringing him off the bench, you're kind of like making him cover for a lot of the mistakes that like Mitch was covering for. It's just like shoes that are too big for him to fill, I think, at this point in his career. And I think that a subtle thing they did yesterday too was putting RJ on Russell, which is like at the point of attack, which I don't think RJ is like this, elite like point of attack defender. But I think when you switch Dante off the ball, you're kind of flexing his strengths a little bit more, which kind of also helps the defense. I think that it was kind of like, I mean, it sucks to see anybody get hurt, but I agree with Shwinny that like it kind of did help their defense in the long run of that game. But again, it was just like an impressive win, just because I felt like they really battled. Like you could see, like Quickley was really trying out there. Hartenstein was giving it his all. Randall, Brunson all had their moments. It was like a really like kind of encouraging win, especially coming off like even that win against Phoenix felt like Brunson kind of just took over and won that game. But this felt like more of like a team effort. Like they kind of did it all together. So it was really encouraging to see overall.
Yeah. To your point, Randall had a play yesterday, which like he definitely got away with a foul there, but he just fucking tossed D'Angelo Russell to the side. That was I actually
you know what I was actually thinking of when I saw that play, like in general, Julius. It's like that Marshawn Lynch clip where he's like over and over and over and over, and the guy's like, "Is that a metaphor?" And he's like, "Run through a motherfucker's face." And that's like all Julius did last night against. And sometimes I like stay away from Anthony Davis, please. There are easier avenues, but it was a very controlled aggression from Julius that when he strikes that balance, he's really tough to defend.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna lie, like I know this, I know this because his box score yesterday at every single point of the game was absurd. But he has that play. I think it was might have been I don't even know what it was. I think it was late in the first half, where he gets the rebound and he has a chance to push. He could pass it forward, but instead he tries to he's like Austin Reeves on him, so he tries to push it on Reeves, and he ends up doing the spin move. Reeves pokes it away, and Randle ends up knocking it out. And those are the plays you're like, just fucking pass the ball, like whatever. But like, you kind of have to, like, you almost have to just accept you're gonna get like 2 or 3 of those a game, if the rest of it is worth it, because the rest of it right now is definitely worth it. What did he have? How many assists did he even have yesterday? I know, like, by the first half, I wanted to say he had like 6. Again, like he was and look, you say whatever you want about his play style and him as a player, and I've been critical of him. A lot of people have been critical of him, but like,
have you, Shwin? I don't remember that.
A few times, but he was so dominant in the first half yesterday. And mind you, this is a team that has Anthony Davis and LeBron James. He was so dominant in that first half. They completely changed their entire defensive scheme at halftime to take Randle out of the game. Like, they started playing way more zone. They were collapsed. Like that. That's why the game, like he I don't even know how many he scored in the second half, to be honest. It wouldn't surprise me if he scored like single digits. But he, like, that tells you something about when he's good, his good is at a level where teams really have to change what their initial game plan was to adjust for that. And I think what made it so impressive yesterday is, and maybe it just helped probably that he was so fucking exhausted by the end of the game that he was just like, dude, Jalen, you'd bring us home, baby. But like, he didn't force it throughout the second half just because he had it in the first half. I thought most of the shots he ended up taking were good shots. He had a couple of decisions where you're like, can you just move the ball really quick or whatever? But like, for the most part, he played within himself. And I think that allowed like other guys to kind of, what's the Lord of the Rings one? Share the load. Like they actually had the opportunity. I thought Quickley had a good second half. Third quarter, I thought he was really big. Hartenstein was obviously massive throughout the game. Brunson really, really found it in the fourth quarter. But like, it was just nice to see him start a game, dominate, force the team to, force the opponent to have to switch up how they were doing it, defending him, and then allowing others to benefit from that and not trying to force it himself. But one thing, if the Knicks could ever close the first half like reasonably, that would be nice. That would be very impressive.
I mean, and there were, I don't want to say extenuating circumstances, but like,
it was weird. It was
out
weird.
there.
Yeah.
It was a lot of the effects. You have
Randle wasn't out there.
Yeah, Randle wasn't out there. I mean, I think Hartenstein starting makes a lot of sense. I think you brought up a good point with Randle, letting, playing through other guys, being willing to trust the pass. I think Quickley is important to bring up there because I think they've like developed some really good chemistry for the last couple of years, really. I think that the on-off with Quickley has always been better for Randle because Quickley is a good floor spacer, and his first year, the other player who was starting for the Knicks was not much of a floor spacer at that position, to say the least. But I'm going to drop some numbers, and we've debated Quickley starting a lot. I think one thing we've talked about is, I think one question I've had is like, whether it's Grimes or DiVincenzo. We saw, right? Grimes went to the bench. DiVincenzo starts. It's the same thing. Grimes starts playing a lot better. DiVincenzo's taking 2 or 3 shots a half. So I was just like, at that point, are you basically just wasting Quickley or any player in that position because they're just not going to get the usage? So this is only with Randle, though, and I want to mention this. So when in the minutes that Randle plays, so Grimes has played 440 minutes with Randle, 84 without him, right? So when Grimes plays with Randle, his usage is 11.7%, which is extremely low. It almost doubles to about 22 when he in 84 minutes without Randle, right? So clearly Grimes gets a lot more touches off the bench. DiVincenzo's at 17% with or without Randle, basically the same. Quickley, without Randle, as you would expect, is at 26.9 usage. He is running those bench units in 284 minutes. In 315 minutes with Randle, his usage only goes down to about 22.3. Still probably lower than you want Emmanuel Quickley's usage, but that's higher than they get from that spot with other shooting guards. So Quickley, if you start him, can give you, and we saw that, right? It ended hilariously bad because he tried to take a contested midi over 80 and airballed it, but he actually waved off Brunson and Randle to ISO late in the fourth, and I thought Tibbs was going to kill him after that. But he's earned the trust, I think, from the other guys in that lineup, particularly Brunson and Randle. But obviously, RJ's always trusted him as well. I think that's a change that's going to happen sooner or later. Not to harp on it, but I think that's something we've debated. I'm curious to your thoughts on that, Ariel, too. Do you think that, we all want Quickley to play more. Do you think it's a situation where he's earned enough where he can really maintain his usage, even if he's playing with the starters, with Brunson and Randle, still do more than maybe the guys in that position usually are asked to do?
I don't know. I go back and forth on it, to be quite honest. They're like last night he closed the game out with that exact lineup with the like projected starting lineup if he was the shooting guard. And again, like his ability to like toggle on and off the ball and space the floor when he's off it and then make things happen when he's on it. I think it would kind of help the starting lineup just in terms of like always having another guy who can create is always a positive. But I would trust it more if I trusted like Tibbs to like manage like staggering those guys, all four of those guys, a little bit better than he has this season. I think one of the biggest issues isn't even just like the amount of minutes guys are getting. It's just like the fact that they're only playing essentially in like one or two lineups, and then that's about it until the fourth quarter. And whatever five guys are playing the best, including Randle and Brunson, were like automatics in the closing lineup. But I just think that when you go from like Quickley comes in at around the 4-minute mark, let's say, of the first quarter, comes out around like the 7-minute mark, 6-minute mark of the second quarter, and then you just don't see him again until the end of the third. And I think that's the issue, is that you're going like 15 minutes of the game or something with one of your like top 3 or 4 best players like not seeing the floor. So I think that like that's the frustrating part for me and has been for me this season, is just feeling like that a lot of guys kind of get frozen out. Like even there's been games this season where even Dante starting a couple games ago and he hits like 3 or 4 threes in the first quarter, and then you don't see him again until like the very end of the second quarter. And I think he kind of freezes guys out doing that. But I kind of avoided your question. I do think that at this point, I'm kind of at the point where I'd rather see the Knicks just kind of start their best guys and just roll with it and figure it out from there. Especially without Mitch, I think they kind of need that. Quickley's ability to communicate on defense, his ability to cover for mistakes. I think just having another guy in there that can make things easier and lessen the responsibility of like what Randle has to do on defense and what Brunson has to do on defense. I think overall it'll be like a major plus to the lineup. Even if his usage does suffer enough, I do think that getting Brunson off the ball a little bit more might be beneficial as well. So I think there are some positives that could come about seeing him start.
And again, I'll mention like the usage goes down, but it's still 23, which is a lot higher than Grimes and DiVincenzo, right? So it's not like he's not on corner duty. I am curious, do you think, given the size, if defense is kind of the prevailing thought here, I think Quickley's a better off-ball defender than Grimes, but Grimes is no slouch there, and he's obviously bigger, a little bit more physical. Would you think that maybe if that was the prevailing sentiment, or do you still think Quickley, maybe even on defense, the best option?
I don't buy that just because he's a better defender like overall than Dante, and Dante's at the point of attack right now. Well, besides last game, I'm not one of those people that is as concerned with the Knicks size, I think, than most people are. I think they actually don't lean into it enough. I think it's kind of like one of their positive things that they can kind of exploit a little bit more. I wish they would kind of make teams match up to their to what they're trying to do a little bit more. I think like playing RJ at the 4 a little bit more. Like when Hart got ejected against the Clippers, I believe it was, and they ran lineups with RJ at the 4. We saw lineups that we hadn't seen all season, and it was fun to kind of like explore that and see what guys are capable of in different situations. So for me, I'm all for kind of leaning into your strengths. And the Knicks have a bunch of guys that are maybe a little bit smaller than you want them to be, but they're all pretty good at playing up in size defensively. Hart plays up in size defensively. Grimes can to a certain extent. I think Quickley he battles, even though he has kind of gotten picked on, I think, the past couple of games, just in the post and stuff. But I think if you force teams to go into the post and Like if it's like Westbrook going into the post against Quickley, or he went against Brunson as well. Like I live with those possessions because I think in the end you're kind of taking the opposing team out of their flow, out of their rhythm, to kind of just isolate this one specific mismatch. So again, I think I don't have a concern with the size at all.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, I don't even really care. I really don't care if he starts or not. It's just like he needs to play 28 or 30 minutes a night. Like, so it doesn't matter to me how it happens. And I really am not like interested in harping on like, oh, he's a starter or this or that thing. Like, but he needs to play 28 or 30 minutes because like they win his minutes every fucking year by like in a landslide. And that this is regardless. He can play with Alec Burks. He can play with Jalen Brunson. He can play with Derrick Rose. He can play with, fucking old man Todd Gibson. Like, he can play with anybody, and that team, for whatever reason, always wins his minutes in massive fashion. Like, and, again, like, I think sometimes we get really caught up in, like, sometimes I think impact can be conflated with, like, stardom, right? And, like, what is stardom? So, like, who's a star? What's a star? Like, I don't know if Emmanuel Quickley can ever be, like, carrying a top level offense on high usage the way that like say like a Tyrese Maxey does, right? I have no idea, but like I do know
last year when Brunson was out though.
Yeah, he did. So maybe it's possible. I have no idea, but I do know this. I do know that when he's on the floor, the guys who are definitely entrusted with carrying the Knicks offense magically seem to play better, and this happens every season. So at some point, maybe you should prioritize a guy playing more with those players because he gets the most out of them too. And even if you're worried about like, oh well, we need somebody to lead the bench unit, you already stagger with RJ, so we already know that you can do this. So you can just do the same thing with Quickley too if you need to. It doesn't take away from that. I do think it's worth mentioning in terms of like staggering the lineups or whatever. I'm not sure. I know that yesterday he was definitely matching up Julius's minutes with LeBron. But it might be something to consider to like flip Julius and RJ's rotations a little bit because I haven't really liked that RJ with the bench lineup in a little bit. It just feels like a little disjointed. I'm not sure. Like he's not in a good rhythm right now either. So like that's affecting it. Like I think he's like very up and down at the moment in time. And like, I don't know, Randle's playing a lot better now. So he probably is better suited to like kind of be the co-carrier of a lineup when Brunson is out with Quickley. Though I do understand like the idea of like it's not easy to match up those minutes and figure out how you're going to do that. But like, I think it's worth considering because I thought yesterday was like, I don't know, I just thought they played really, really well in both halves, those groups. And I know they didn't start the fourth quarter off well offensively, but that kind of is the point where it's like they didn't start the fourth quarter off well offensively. And I think by the time Brunson came back in, they'd scored maybe like 4 points, but they had only lost 3 points off the lead. They're only up 7 at that point instead of 10. So like that kind of just drives home that like that bench group, the defense has been pretty solid with RJ or with Randle. I think your offensive ceiling though with Randle in that group is definitely higher.
Do you before you guys answer that, are you concerned? Would you be concerned at all what that does for like RJ in terms of like his on-ball touches if he's not getting run with the bench unit?
I'll be completely honest. Like I don't know that RJ needs to have on-ball touches super max. Like if his on-ball touches are on par with Emmanuel Quickley, like I'm fine with that. I don't think he needs to be. To me, he shouldn't be on a different level right now. If he has it going on a certain night or for a stretch, yeah, absolutely, fucking give him more. But like right now, like he hasn't established a level of consistency or impact offensively where I think that he needs to be guaranteed like the third most touches on the team every single night. Because there's just like, I mean, look, for their careers, Quickley shoots better from the field. He shoots better from three. He has a higher true shooting. He has a higher effective field goal percentage. Like he's been more efficient. And I know like, yeah, of course the playoffs happened and RJ played better than Quickley did. Sure. But like, we're just talking about the regular season here. In the regular season, from what we've seen, there's really not much of an argument that like there's some huge benefit of RJ getting a higher share of touches and a higher share of usage and a higher share of, just offensive importance than Quickley. And like, honestly, I think RJ might, the more I watch and like the more I, look, it's his 5th year. It's just like, would he benefit from maybe being asked to do less and being tasked to do less? Because you still see a lot of like the questionable decision making. I do want to say like I didn't love his offensive decision making performance or at all yesterday, but like I thought his defense in the second half was really good. Like I thought he did a really good job.
Last foul, but
yeah, and I'll say this: like I know that everybody's like, oh, how do you foul a 3-point shooter? I think it's really easy to say that. And if he let's say he doesn't contest that 3 at all because he's like, fuck, if I contest this, I'm going to foul him. If Reeves hits the 3, people are going to kill him for that too. So like, I just
and it was a good effort to get around.
Yeah, I really wasn't upset about it. I just thought like, we can all do the Clyde thing of like, oh, come on, man, how are you going to foul a 3-point shooter? It's the dumbest foul in the league. But it's like, yeah, but magically it happens every fucking night. Like it's hard. It's really hard. He was trying to make the right plays, I'll take the effort like that all the time. If he fucks up, fine, he fucks up. But like, I'll take that effort and I'll be fine with that because I just thought his defensive effort overall in the second half was really good. There was actually a possession where I forgot who was somebody. They kind of like set a little screen for AD in the mid range for him to pop out, and he had a wide ass open jumper because Hartenstein went under. And after the play, you could see RJ like look at Hartenstein like what the fuck, dude? You have to get out there. Like that's Anthony Davis. You probably can't just give Anthony Davis a wide open 17-footer. But like just whether you think like, well, RJ is the wrong messenger for that or not, like I just think it's good when you see guys invested. Care like that. Yeah, they're invested, and he's pointing out like to me like he was right. Like Hartenstein can't just fucking go under on Anthony Davis from 17 feet. Like that's a layup for him. He's like that's literally a layup. So I just thought his effort was really good. He grabbed a pretty big like a contested defensive rebound in the fourth quarter that felt big in the moment. But just in general, like I thought he played really well defensively, and in this season overall, his defense has been better, which I think is helping. Like, look, the offensive kind of I know the numbers look a little bit better than they were last year, but like it still feels on aggregate like he's still very up and down on that end. But if you can just play at a pretty consistent defensive level, it goes a long way. It goes a long way. And I thought yesterday's second half defense, especially on D'Angelo Russell, was, I mean, he pretty much locked him up. So,
yeah, and I'll add to that. So, kind of getting back to your point, Ariel, I don't necessarily see his most, like he does well with that bench unit, but I don't think it's because he gets on ball in like the kind of, operate from the middle, you're running the offense, right? He still loves to come off that pistol. He only scored 3 baskets yesterday. One of them was off a nice cut to the middle. I think there's a few things that bench lineup that help him. One, he's not carrying the whole load. And the guy he's with is Quickley, who, like you said, can toggle on and off ball. They can run some stuff together. The other guy at the 4, like Randle is a better player than Hart. I'm not questioning that. Randle's a better shooter than Hart. But Hart is actually, his most underrated skill is probably his ability to move and cut and create those opportunities, distracted defender, so that when RJ is coming downhill to the rim, the guy isn't just waiting, he's in conflict, right? Even if Hart isn't the world's greatest floor spacer, I think those are the things that really help RJ get more usage with the bench. Yeah, and of course, part of it is he's now away from 2 very high usage guys. But in terms of the on-ball creation stuff, if he gets the ball in that side action or against a wrong-footed defender, he's become really crafty with his footwork around the rim. But we saw last night, like, when he takes like that pull-up jumper from the mid-range, you're like, it's not your shot, RJ. But that's kind of the point, right? Like, if you're going to be an on-ball creator, you need that in your bag. He's developed that little floater that, when he's got it going, and that was a big part of, by the way, his playoff improvement. That little within 10 feet, he's found a way to be more effective. But until he becomes like either like a super elite or a really, really good passer, or he develops more of a pull-up game, which, I mean, and I'm not going to kill him for experimenting with that because he's probably aware of that, to get to the next level, that's what he needs to add. But like his most effective role, I think you have to figure out ways to kind of get him in a more of a fluid offense where he can move off ball, where he can get the ball in motion and wrong-footed defender on the closeout without having to, use some, multiple moves or just beat with like beat with burst from like a good position, right? Beat a set defense. So to answer your question, like I do think it's not ideal for him to not get those bench minutes because he gets more usage there. But I think calling it on ball is a little bit of a broad stroke. It's a little bit more complex than that. And like, that's why in the starting lineup, I think he doesn't get to do that as much because Randle isn't going to cut much because Brunson's a solid off-ball player, but that's just not how that starting lineup offense works as much.
Yeah. Just to be clear, I wasn't like advocating that like RJ's like on ball. He needs these on ball touches because I do think he would help from like scaling back a bit. My point was more so I've always felt like his role with the bench, not his role with the bench. I don't want this to come off negatively, but I've always felt like it was always kind of like Tibbs throwing him a bone, like, oh, you're coming off the bench. This is kind of your lineup. This is your unit, Even though he's getting the same amount of usage as Quickley, it's always felt like, at least from like the Tibbs perspective, is that it was more about getting RJ these touches so that he's okay with like doing the off-ball stuff when he's playing with Brunson and Randle in the starting lineup.
No, I mean, yeah, that's pretty much how I see it. And I actually think that's why, like, I don't particularly love that. As far as like, I don't like the idea of like giving the guy an idea that it's his lineup or something, like
that's a reality in the NBA, right? To keep guys engaged, like, that.
Well, I mean, I get that it's fine if you want to keep it engaged, but like, it's a problem if you're suppressing other guys or you're like, I don't know if you want to say RJ suppressing Quickley or that group or whatever, but like they would probably benefit more from, honestly, a lot of it just goes back to RJ decision-making stuff where it's like, look, if he wants to make it his unit, it can be his unit. I don't really give a shit, but like, it can also be your unit because you're taking like 2 less shots and you're actually kicking out and spraying out to shooters more. Like, there's a way for it to still be your, like, look, he's not going to be LeBron James, but like, watch LeBron, right? Like, LeBron can run a lineup and it'll just be because he's diming guys up. Like, it's not because he's putting up 7 shots right in a row. Like, there's ways for you to like be the man and still get other guys involved. And I feel like RJ, and maybe some of this has to do with Tibbs too, because we've seen historically a lot of players when they play for Tibbs, their assist rates drop, and they take more shots in the rim at the rim in the paint. Like, they're forcing the shots because those are the shots he wants ultimately. And so like maybe some of this is on Tibbs, but at the end of the day, like, RJ's the one that's out on the floor making decisions, and way too often you're like, he's calling his own number instead of just spraying out to somebody that's open for 3, or he's just forcing action. Like, there was one yesterday where he drove in right at the end of the first half where he like took this ridiculous floater over AD off after an offensive rebound, and it's like, he had a pass wide open to Brunson for 3 if he wanted it, and he looked that off to drive and then take this like insane floater, which must have been from at least 12 feet out, over Anthony Davis, who had already like blocked his shit fucking multiple times in the half. It's just a terrible shot. And it's like, those are the shots where I'm like, why, what goes through your head there? Like, why, how do you think that's the shot in that situation? Like, he could have even taken a corner 3 off that possession if he wanted it, and he passed up on that to drive. And it's just like, and you take that one isolated decision, and then you spread that out over more minutes. You spread that out in a lineup where you're the man. I think you get some of like those stretches that actually hurt his overall impact and his efficiency and all that stuff. And I just think scaling back a little bit, not even necessarily scaling back, either scaling back or just like really emphasizing with him, like, hey, dude, these guys are fucking open. Like, why don't you just pass the ball? You don't need to force up a shot here. Like, what's cool? Like, yeah, getting 20 points is cool. Getting 5 assists is pretty cool too. Like, let's aim for a new target.
That passing shit comes real easy to a hooper.
I wish it did.
I think, I mean, I haven't really had, I feel like his decision making has been better this year. You still have the kind of stuff where you want to pull your hair out. I think to your original point though, with Randle, it's not even so much that I think the bench is, I think RJ and Quickley, whatever ups and downs they had, they figure it out. I think they have pretty good chemistry together. It's like, is there a backup four who can, or a bench unit that can effectively defend Julius Randle when he's not like shitting on himself? Like, not really, you know, like, I mean, there aren't a lot of bench centers who are great rim protectors, right? And then you surround him with, again, that lineup has our best perimeter defenders, right? It has Quickley, it has Hart, it has Grimes now, or if it before Grimes, DiVincenzo is a solid defender. We'll see if the other complication now is if you have to play Randle with Sims. I don't love that front court at all because Sims, for all his, we've talked about this, he's not a rim protector, right? He is very good. He's a mobile guy. He can jump really high. He's a solid weak side shot blocker. Randle, Sims, I don't. So that might be the wrench in this idea, but like Randle in theory surrounded by other shooters and defenders, like that's like and that's something you want to have in your back pocket come playoff time. Like you want to be able to stagger Brunson and Randle ideally if you have two all-star level players. So I think it might not even be as much about RJ, who I think has been generally better in terms of his process and decision making. Like I think the reasons why I like him on that bench are a little bit different than, you know, like as I mentioned, like I think he's just better when he cuts, when he's actually turned into a pretty good relocator, you know, shot relocator. He's good at creating angles for open threes. But you know, it's also there's something exciting about Randle just being able to play against bench guys and to play in all that space and have his defensive shortcomings, you know, covered more.
Yeah, I think an underrated aspect of like the bench unit is how simple they kind of make the game for whoever the ball handlers are. Like Grimes isn't gonna ask for much. He'll sit in his corner and he'll free himself up for threes. Hart isn't like, I mean, Hart can get aggressive in transition and sometimes a little bit like attacking a closeout. But other than that, you know, he's mostly there and he understands that like it's about creating, like making things easier for whoever the ball handler is on the floor there. And I think when like Randall's in the bench unit or RJ's in the bench unit, regardless, I think they kind of play similarly. And I think that bench unit benefits both of them in pretty much the exact same way. So I would like to see I would like to see them mix it up. I don't think it has to be so black and white where it's like, okay, yeah, now it's Randall's turn with the bench unit for the next 15 games or whatever. I think in like a perfect world, game to game, it'd be different depending on who has it going, or if you need to get this guy a little bit more touches because he's been struggling. I would love to see it be a little bit more of a free flowing decision.
Are you suggesting Tibbs be flexible?
How dare I, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, yeah, Tibbs is, that's always been his issue. That's his biggest issue is the rotation rigidity. Like even schematic rigidity, like I think it's sometimes a little bit overblown. I think he's definitely been more flexible this year, but like, yeah, the rotation stuff is really, I mean, that's really what we're like, that's the main frustration, right? When it comes to like a guy like Quickley's minutes, where you're like, dude, like the only reason he's not playing more is almost because of this kind of like bizarre fixation on like, no, my starters have to play X amount of minutes together and then the bench guys can come in and then from there we'll see what happens. But like once you start out, like when you're basically saying like the first 7 to 9 minutes of each half, my starters will be the starters and that will not change. Like that's a problem. And it's honestly like kind of crazy when you compare it to almost every other coach you go up against. I feel like every team we play, other teams are making subs much before that point in the game or that point in the half. And it's like when Tibbs refuses to, it's really, really frustrating. Ariel, you wrote a piece on the Knicks defense that you dropped yesterday on your Substack. Yesterday was a better defensive effort, but are you still pretty concerned about kind of like their ability to kind of hold the line here a little bit without Mitchell Robinson?
I still have concerns. I think where they're really struggling is when opposing teams have like a ball handler who like consistently gets 2 on the ball, and now you're like really dependent on like Randle and Brunson and RJ or whoever's on the floor to really nail those rotations. And then you don't have the safety net behind you in Mitchell Robinson. I think LeBron obviously is someone who can get 2 to the ball, but it's kind of different than like Devin Booker drawing 2 to the ball. just in terms of like the shot making ability and the 3-point shooting like aspect, the pull up aspect of it. So I still have a lot of concerns. I think the positive signs from yesterday, outside of the fact that they held the Lakers to pretty, what was it, 106, which is you take that every single night. I think they fouling a lot less during that little 6-game stretch where the defense really slid. They were fouling a lot more. They were They finished possessions. They grabbed a bunch of defensive rebounds yesterday. I think the Lakers only had like 9 offensive rebounds, and that's a team that really like punishes you inside for the most part. So that was nice to see. But I also think that has to do with playing Hartenstein like 40 minutes. But overall, I think where my concern is with the starting lineup, if Sims is somehow healthy and ready to play against Brooklyn on Wednesday, I'd still be concerned just about the level of defense that kind of requires Sims to be that number one, like your best defender in the starting lineup. That's very concerning to me. I don't think Dante is a point of attack defender. I think he's much better off the ball, where he can kind of jump passing lanes, and you can see him make these kind of really good anticipatory like rotations and reads. So it still feels like the bench and the starting lineup are like unbalanced right now, just in terms of like as currently constructed, all 4 of your best defenders are coming off the bench: Hartenstein, Grimes, and Quickley. So I think you need to get at least 2 of those guys into the starting lineup, whether it's Quickley or Grimes for the shooting guard position, and then keep obviously Hartenstein. I'm a big proponent for starting him, but I think going forward, I mean, their defense is really going to be tested. They got Brooklyn, and then they got the 2 games against Milwaukee, who has kind of really lit them up because Lillard's ability to draw onto the ball. And they've also benefited from some hot shooting from like Malik Beasley in those games, and Marjon Beauchamp. But yeah, just overall,
Who was the white guy? AJ Green. AJ Green.
AJ Green.
How could I forget that
AJ
name?
Green.
That's the craziest. That's so crazy.
Not your older brother's AJ Green, to say the least.
But yeah, I'm definitely still slightly concerned. I want to see them like keep this kind of defensive infrastructure going on for a couple of games. I do think they kind of did give up a lot of threes yesterday, and like if Taurean Prince is like 6 of 13 instead of like 3 for 13, maybe it's a completely different game. But at the same time, I mean, if Taurean Prince is taking 13 threes, it's probably like your defense is probably doing a good job of like funneling shots to him. But yeah, I'm still kind of looking out to see, but cautiously optimistic after last game. It's definitely like a positive sign in the right direction.
Yeah, I just to kind of add on that, I would say I am a little concerned if DiVincenzo is going to start next game. Who matches up? I mean, Cam Thomas is healthy, right? So, he is exactly the kind of player who's given DiVincenzo trouble. I think that we've talked a lot about Quickley's defense, and we were just a little critical of Tibbs. So I'll say this: I think that the opinions on Quickley's defense vary. I do think I'm not sure he would. I think he's a really smart player. He'd be good defensively in any scheme. I think the level of impact he's able to have is a product a little bit of how the scheme and what it rewards, really, more than anything else. Because we think of Tibbs as like this hard-nosed, physical, effort-based coach, but a lot of this is about kind of being able. You mentioned RJ plays at the scheme, right? Guys who can play above the scheme. You need that if you're going to have Randle and Brunson in your lineup, right? Because they, on their best nights, are scraping the bottom of that. By the way, for Brunson, I felt really bad. That AD lob that he broke up, but AD still made it. You could tell how disheartened he was. He was like, "Man, I did my job."
To be fair, I will say, I think, I don't think that was an accident. I think AD adjusted to Brunson tipping it because they showed it from the
alien.
Yeah, they showed it from the reverse angle, so you could see Brunson tip it first, and then you can see AD swat at it too. And I was just
like a volleyball block,
right? It was, but yeah, that was a really good, because I think that cut the lead to 8, right? Yeah. And it was just you felt like if you get a stop there and a score, the game's over. That's what it felt like. And then for them to score that way, you're like, are you fucking kidding me?
But so I'll say this also, I was thinking about this yesterday a little bit. There's 100, 200 level defense, which is, as you said, playing at the scheme, right? You do your job. You have an understanding of what your role is. And there's maybe 300 level defense where you're you understand not just your job, but you understand what everyone else's jobs are, right? And then I think there's like graduate level defense where you're like, you not only understand what everyone's jobs are, you understand the philosophy, and you can execute. So you can execute your job, you can execute. What the team execution looks like. We also know philosophically when the team execution maybe is what the offense wants, or it's playing into something that you hadn't planned for. How can you adapt, right? And I think the guys that they've targeted in free agency, the guys that they really like, who've had the most impact, do that. Hart is a guy who it's never gonna scream lockdown defender, but he's a guy who's that's why he's racked up so many steals over the course of his career. That's why he's so great at defensive rebounding. The ability to adapt and not just say this is our jobs. This is like what we're trying to accomplish. This is what it's like supposed to look like. Quickley is an expert at that. I think you need at least one of those guys, and Mitch is like that too. By the way, like I think Mitch has never probably gotten credit for how cerebral he is on defense because he's kind of let's face it, a goofy guy who posts funny shit on TikTok or whatever. But he's a very smart defender. He can adapt. He's very adaptable, right? That's really the word I'm looking for here. And I think especially with around guys like, and Brunson has aspects of that too. He's just, there's only so much he can do. I mean, and people blame the scheme for giving up a lot of threes, but that's kind of the point. I don't think it's just that Tibbs he's fine with threes as opposed to layups. It is that he relies on guys being able to make those closeouts and stunt and kind of play that game of chicken with shooters who maybe aren't that comfortable. Like, is he closing out? Is he attacking, right? Win those kind of rock, paper, scissors, shoots battles. Those are the guys who are most effective. Because you look at Tibbs' career, he had Jimmy, he had guys like Luol Deng. He's often like the best defenders, besides Jimmy, have often been guys who are like Joakim Noah was 6'10" maybe on a good day. He wasn't the freakiest athlete. He wasn't like the biggest dude, but he was an extremely he got those things. And I think that's what that starting lineup and Grimes had that. Mitch had that. With Mitch out, especially, you need one of those guys in there. And I think DiVincenzo can do that, but he's also the on-ball, the point of attack stuff next to Brunson is a little bit too much. Maybe that'll be true with Quickley too. But I think that I don't see DiVincenzo staying in the starting lineup too much longer. Or, I think they're eventually going to have to adapt to that, to Ariel's point.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's like the thing with Mitch too is he's just bigger. So like it makes it's a huge deal. I mean, we saw this yesterday, even like when you saw Sims next to AD to start this game, I was like, oh my fucking God, this is going to be awful. And there's that one possession where AD just backed him down for like 10 feet, right? And gets a foul. But once Hartenstein came in, you could obviously, you're never going to stop AD, right? Fucking the guy lit up last year in the Western Conference Finals even, right? Against Jokic. But you're not going to stop him. But you need to make it a challenge. You need to have an impact. And you could just see visibly when Hartenstein came in, you're like, okay, this looks like an actual center matchup here. So, yeah, I mean, they definitely miss a lot in terms of Mitch's ability not just to execute the scheme to your point, but to play above it and impact it in the way that it needs to. If you're going to play this scheme, you need to have this level of rim protector who, impacts opponents X%, whatever the fuck that is. Sims just cannot do that. If you're gonna start Sims, then you really need to totally rethink what you want your base defensive scheme to be. There's stuff he can do. He's a really good switch defender for a big guy. He can show and recover. He can play the more aggressive schemes, but you got to be willing to do it. And the problem is, and I get why Tibbs doesn't want to, is he doesn't trust the other guys. He doesn't trust Julius. He doesn't trust Brunson. He doesn't trust RJ necessarily, but he doesn't trust those guys to do all the things that you need to do and be on a string consistently to execute those schemes. So it's kind of like a really weird decision that he's gone with and stuck with. And the funny thing is too, and I'm curious to get your guys' thoughts on this. If you look at Jericho Sims' career numbers, okay, and you just go to his on-court, on-off data or whatever, He played one season. His first season is the only season he's even come close to grading out as an on-court positive. He was a plus 7.9 on the floor and a plus 8.9 on-off. I would pretty much say that in large part, that is because he came off the bench. So one, he's naturally not playing against opposition centers as much or starting centers as much. Two, he played more with guys who can, one, cover for him, but two, also you can play way more aggressive schemes. Like you can be more aggressive with Sims.
He wasn't playing with Kemba and Fournier.
Right. When you're playing with Quickley, when you're playing with Burks, right? When you're playing with Deuce at that time, when you're playing with Grimes at that time, Grimes was getting minutes off the bench at that time. Like all of a sudden, now you have guys that can cover for you, and you can unlock these different things that he can do. And it's kind of like I feel really bad for him again because I just think this weird thing of Tibbs being like, well, no, I don't want to mess up the bench, so I'm going to start Sims. It puts him in a bad position and makes him look really bad. Like he's looked really bad the last couple of years when he's played because it's like, dude, he's not built to just fucking execute drop coverage and like cover for Randle and Brunson and all this shit. Like that's not what he can do. But what he can do, and especially now that Grimes is coming off the bench, if that's what you want to do, it makes it even more frustrating because I'm like, this is literally you have the opportunity to play a lineup that fucking kicked ass a couple of years ago coming off the bench. Why would you not want to do that? And like, you have the potential to strengthen your starting lineup and not give up much off the bench. And like, not even trying that because you're just like, no, Hartenstein's too good in his role. I don't want to fuck up my rotations or anything like that. Like, that just seems absurd to me. I don't get it. And it's like, like it will be really annoying if Sims can't go on Wednesday and he starts like Taj because he's like, no, I just got it. Hartenstein he has not started a single game for the Knicks. And Jericho Sims, he has started 26 games for his career. Guess how many games for his career Emmanuel Quickley started?
There's like one less than that, right?
Yeah, it's 27.
Yeah.
Like, these are just like, obviously they don't play the same position, but that should never be the case. It's crazy. Just start Hartenstein. This is really not that complicated. He's a way better player. He's way better suited to playing against better players and bigger players. And the other thing is like, he's going
to end up playing 20 minutes in a row, by the way, right? Obviously yesterday Sims was hurt, but it ends up in that same thing where he's coming off the bench, but he's like, okay, we can't take him out though. He's clearly better than Sims. So he just plays the rest of the half. And that's especially taxed. I mean, it's one thing for Quickley, who's, smaller and, not as heavy, but I am worried about that. If Hartenstein's going to have to carry that kind of load at that size and play that hard until Mitch is back, that's a little concerning.
Yeah. I don't know. It feels like starting Sims is doing like a disservice to the team and to the player Sims. It just doesn't. I don't see the benefit of it. It's too much responsibility. It's too much. You're asking him to be something that he isn't, and that he's shown throughout his NBA career he isn't. One of the first things I noticed when he came into the NBA was that like his positioning and drop is like pretty poor. He's either too high up or he's too far back. And then, he does lack size.
He's also super square all the time. Like he's straight up. And he doesn't have a good wingspan really, right? So it's like
Yeah.
Oh, that
where he thrives is on the perimeter.
He has a 7'3" wingspan, so it's reasonable, but
okay.
He just,
but yeah,
he's small, man. For a center anyway. I could bench press more than him.
I mean, he's the same height as Julius, probably, right? Yeah, I'm sure you can.
Yeah. I think Julius honestly looks like bigger than him. I don't know.
Probably because he plays bigger than him, it feels like.
Yeah,
but yeah, I get your point. Yeah. I think if you're gonna play Sims, you kind of have to be like more willing to do like switching stuff and allowing him to like kind of flex his like lateral speed. I don't know. And it's clear that Tibbs knows that because he played him at the 4 last season.
Yeah, and he knows that too because that's what made him good his rookie season. Where I was like, wow, like Knicks really found something with this guy because he's like he can run these schemes that like. As Mitch is getting bigger and is more like a lumbering dude now, you can't have him switch out all the time and fucking aggressively like show and recover and all these things. Like You just can't do it with him. So he knows it. Like there was a game against Brooklyn that year, his rookie year, where he closed with Sims over Mitch because he was like, they were trapping KD, so he'd give up the ball, and then Sims would have to go recover back to his man. And it's like, Mitch can't do that shit, right? Like Mitch can't be like 7 feet behind the arc, trapping KD, and then like run back to his man and like not fucking have a heart attack on the floor or something. Just asking way too much of him. Sims can do that, like, because he moves that well. He's fluid. He's a really good athlete. And the other part with him about in drop, like he has no vertical when he's backpedaling. He has none. Like he has no vertical there, and he can't hold. Like he's a big dude. He can't like he for whatever reason he just gets overpowered very easily in those situations. So like, you know, I feel bad for him. And the other part too, with Hartenstein starting is like Hartenstein adds value offensively that Sims won't. And like Sims is a pretty decent ball handler. Like for a big guy, he is actually a pretty decent ball handler.
Mm-hmm.
He's not really like a great passer though, and he's a good screen setter, but he's not really a great passer, so you can't really leverage some of that stuff. He's a good offensive rebounder. It's not a great one. And like so much of that starting lineup's kind of ethos was built on this, like, we're going to win the possession battle thing, and we'll just put up shots and Mitch will clean up the glass at a historic level. And like, that's how we can kind of game the system, even if we're not shooting that well. Like Sims just being good instead of the best offensive rebounder in the league, that's a really big difference. And like, you're not getting as much offensively out of that group either. So I think Hartenstein gives you value on both ends that Sims doesn't give you. Hartenstein's a really good offensive rebounder, but he's also like, you know, he is a good screen setter, and he's also just a good passer. I mean, that pass he had to Quick in the corner yesterday for that relocation three was crazy. That was like through his legs. He dropped that through. So, you know, those are the things that you get with Hartenstein. I mean, he had that one play, that short roll where he dumped it off to Randle. That was like probably, I mean, I think that's one of the best passes I've ever seen him make. That was a really, really impressive play. But like, that's the shit you can get from him that you're not going to get from Sims on top of the defense. So like, there's really just, I just don't see any argument at this point that like Sims should be starting over him when healthy. I think it hurts your chances of winning basketball games. And look, if the point is to win back, like that's what the point is, right? Like that's what we're trying to do, is win as many games as we can. Like, come on, this is not a hard decision. This is a fucking layup, and Tibbs just got to take it. Like I understand his logic, but like in this case, the trade-off is just not worth it at all.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe you can't start Hartenstein until he like completes one of those behind the back passes in the paint that he's been trying to do for like 3 games in a row.
So those two, they were crazy. I was like, he had no angle on them. There was like 3 guys. It was just, I couldn't believe. I honestly was shocked that Tibbs didn't pull him, especially after the second time he did it. I was like, really? Yeah. Like that was such a stupid play.
You're testing me. I'll fucking do it again. Yeah, no, I think that I mean, I think that's a pretty obvious thing, and I expect it to happen. You know, they might couch it with Sims being injured. I think it's pretty obvious at this point. Nick Claxton's pretty good. I'm not really excited to see Sims try to defend him. So I think the sooner that change happens, the better. You know, we've talked about a lot of the guys talk about Quickley, a lot about Randle. You know, Brunson kind of started the game a little bit slow, didn't have his best passing game, maybe, although he had that one laser to Quickley late. It didn't result in an assist, but it was a really nice pass. I'm going to throw this to you, Ariel, just because of all the conversations around, you know, the Knicks, you know, don't have a guy like Tatum or like, you know, the top offensive options. I felt for a while that, like, especially during the stretch when their defense has just been atrocious, that hasn't really been the issue, right? Having a quote unquote closer, right? We saw it. Brunson was going at defensive player of the year caliber player, and not just him, like their whole LeBron has been playing really well on defense too. Really good help defender. Reeves is a really good help defender. Cam Reddish has been pretty effective on ball. They tried him on Brunson, no avail really. My contention is that, like, at least in terms of having a number one star level scoring option in the playoffs, that shouldn't be the concern right now, right?
I'm kind of there. I think I tweeted this like a week ago where I said like, like regardless of where you rank Brunson, I think that he's proven that in any game or in any series that he's capable of like being the best player in a game or a series. I think offensively, his shot making ability and he still hasn't even like kind of gotten to where he was last year from inside the arc. But offensively, in terms of shot making, like there's very few players that are able to like get to their own shots against the level of defenders that he's facing. He's always being guarded by like the 6'8" freakishly long wing, and he's still able to like just literally create angles like out of nowhere. And now that he's kind of expanded his game beyond the arc, and not only is he comfortable making it, but like it's a shot that he looks for now. I think it really kind of expands like what he's able to do. I think there's some more passing angles available to him this season that weren't there last year because of how higher up defenses have to play him. He made a pass last night.
The
I
one to
think it was to
Quickley.
Quickley. Yeah, it was
That pass was
filthy.
nuts.
Yeah. And he's made a couple of those this year. Like they kind of come randomly, and you're just like, whoa! Like he made a skip pass across the corner, and it's really tough at his size to kind of see those angles, which is why kind of you don't see those lobs that he throws. He very very rarely throws lobs like Mitch, and there's a lot of frustration with that. But I think when the Knicks are looking for kind of a star talent, I don't think it's because of like they need a quote unquote closer, because I think Brunson has kind of proven that he is that. I think what they're looking for is someone kind of more. This is gonna come off as a shot to Randall, but like kind of who gives you more of like a stable of like, okay, you know what you're getting. I think with Randall, we kind of know what we're getting from him in the regular season, even if it looks different season to season. I think just in the playoffs, there isn't that confidence of like, okay, this is what Randall is going to be, and you're going to get this level of production. Because I think if you had that confidence in Randall, I think your outlook on what the Knicks playoff chances are would be a lot more higher than they are. I think a lot of the like, oh, well, the Knicks are like a second round exit at max. A lot of that conversation, I think, comes from the fact that people aren't confident that Julius Randle can maintain like his all NBA, all star level play in the playoffs. Because I think if if you do get that level of Julius in the playoffs, I think they have like a pretty good chance against not any team. I still think Boston is significantly better. Milwaukee's been a little bit iffy this season, but I still think you give them the benefit of the doubt, no doubt.
The thing is, they just
Um,
score against everybody now. Milwaukee's like averaging
yeah,
140 a fucking game. It's ridiculous.
yeah, they kind of just flipped the switch on who they were from last year. Completely opposite. But yeah,
Clippers too,
it's
by the
just
way. They've been playing fantastic basketball. But
yeah. I saw their game yesterday. It completely destroyed Indiana. But yeah, I just think I don't know. I still I I think that when they make their move for whoever ends up being the star guy that they've been targeting for years, I don't think it comes with the idea of like, oh, it's because we need a closer. I think it's we need Brunson to have someone who's there with him when it like matters, just to have another option out there, another guy who creates, another guy who draws defenses, so that defenses just aren't like doing what Miami did to Brunson last season, where they were just like, okay, someone else beat us, and as we saw, nobody else could, and it was just Brunson going insane for what 6 games.
so if we see the version of Randall that we saw last night, does that change your mind a little bit on that?
Um, in terms of what? Change my mind in terms of like the Knicks needing a star, or
Yeah, like can Randall be that guy that you just described if he plays the way he did last
oh,
night?
I think so. I think if Randall proves to be that guy this year, and let's say he's essentially who he was last night over a playoff series, over the playoffs, I think that what that does is you kind of look at the roster completely different, because I think like in terms of a long term view, I think Brunson is like your one like, okay, yeah, this guy is gonna be here. I think Randall and RJ and Quickley, I think they, for different reasons, they all kind of have their sort of question marks. I think people question whether you should pay that much for a guy who's coming off the bench. There's another small guard when you already have a small guard in Brunson, who's your main guy. I think Randall has the playoff question marks, and I think RJ has like the inconsistency factor where he kind of doesn't really do the role player things you would want next to a Randall and a Brunson. So I think it becomes less about acquiring like another star, which even though it would still be nice, I think it becomes more about retooling the roster to bring even more out of Brunson and Randle, because for all the Knicks have done in the past few years, which I think they've done an awesome job of bringing in young talent. I think you can argue that this team still isn't optimally built to get the very best version of Brunson, to get the very best version of Randle on a night-to-night basis. I think Mitchell Robinson, for example, is the perfect, like, kind of, who's emblematic of this, where Mitchell Robinson is awesome. I don't think there's anybody who's higher on him than me. But you kind of see it even in the 6 games that he's been, or 7 now, I think, that he's been out. It's the offense looks a lot like smoother. There isn't someone kind of camping under the basket, trying to grab all these offensive rebounds, which obviously does have value. We know it has value, but is him not being in the paint, not camping under the basket.
Right.
Is that
the value is for him. It actually doesn't amplify anything for Randle or Brunson. And I'm not saying it's not net negative. It's obviously not a net negative, but it's also like that benefits Mitch. That doesn't benefit Randle. It doesn't benefit Brunson. And yeah, like to your point, like spacing 5. Like the Knicks have not had a spacing 5 for I don't even do it since Porzingis got traded. Okay, no, that doesn't count. But it's like what? It's like literally Porzingis, right? Like, is that the only spacing 5? Like, we haven't had a spacing 5, and I'm not saying, like, I know these. It's easier to say go get a spacing 5 than actually finding one worth it. This is why last summer, like, me and Stacy talked about this a lot, but like I thought it was worth considering going out to get Porzingis, especially because he is a good defensive player. He'd be great. He's great in drop. He's fucking awesome in drop.
This version of Porzingis right now is probably the perfect center. To put alongside Randle and Brunson.
Yeah, well, and we were saying that. Remember when Porzingis was still here? I think you had written about this on PNT. That was who we wanted in free agency, right? To pair before we were going to trade Porzingis, Randle was the guy, right? So this goes way back.
Randle but like they've always made sense together. And yeah, like this version of Randle and this version of Brunson with Porzingis, yeah, like it, whatever. I get why they didn't make a move for him, and we'll see what happens. But like, yeah, but they do need to like. And I don't think you need it to be a starting caliber guy that plays fucking 30 minutes a night, but you need that option. The Knicks don't have an option, and you got to have an option for that. And I think like I don't think like Kelly Olynyk is not Kristaps Porzingis, but I would be interested in trying to see if you get him for a couple seconds at the deadline or something. Because I think he gives you something that you don't have. Like you don't have this option. You don't have a guy that can credibly like play center minutes and has played center minutes for playoff teams in the playoffs. Like he just gives you a dimension you don't have. And I'd be interested in like kicking the tires on that for a little bit. We'll see. Or maybe you just go get Lauri Markkanen. That'd be fun too.
Marketing.
Yeah. I mean, I think to your point too, is like in terms of optimize, if you're going to have Mitch, then you like, it really needs to be something where the other spacers are immaculate. And like, Grimes isn't shooting great, but like he's a really good shooter. Teams are not going to leave him alone. DiVincenzo has proven himself to be a really good shooter, right? Quickley's a really good shooter, whatever. Like Josh Hart, not a great shooter, but I think he just gives you so much value in so many other ways you can live with it. But like that's why I am intrigued by like, oh yeah, Markkanen at 3 or something. Like, I don't know. I think that would be, I would do it.
The report yesterday was that Danny Ainge is going to try to ask for a pound of flesh. So
like 5 first-round picks or something.
Yeah, I mean, look, at some point though, like I appreciate patience and prudence and all that stuff that they've done, but like you got to take a shot on somebody. And like if you're going to continue with Brunson and Randle, right? If these 2 guys are like they're part of your program or whatever the fuck you want to call it, I can't think of a guy like you're not going to get Porzingis anymore, right? So that's off the board. There's no spacing 5s you're going to find that's at that level. So you need a 3 or somebody in the front court that is just like a lights out shooter that teams have to honor out there forever and is not ball dominant. And that is literally Lauri Markkanen. That is Lauri Markkanen. Yeah. And like, you can go ahead.
Do you worry about building a defense around Randle?
No.
Markkanen and Brunson? Really?
I do worry about it, but here's my thing. If we're talking about like swapping out RJ for Markkanen, 100% stand. Like I do think RJ's played better defense this year. Like, can we be real? What is Markkanen actually a worse defender than RJ Barrett? I don't think so. And he's a much better defensive rebounder. So, like, to me, the question is not about. Like, again, the point is, if you're committed to this Brunson Randle thing, then you've got to make a move somewhere, right? It has to be on the wing, basically. Mm-hmm. Is Markkanen perfect? Probably not. Is he the ideal exact piece that you'd want next to him? No, that's Paul George. That's probably why they kicked the tires on Paul George last summer. But, like, he's played the three. Offensively, there should not be an issue in terms of he's a really non-ball dominant scorer, which is what you want next to these guys. He's clearly capable of spacing the floor. Like, I don't know. To me, if you're going to take a shot, like, this is a guy to take a shot on. I really strongly believe that. And if Danny Ainge is asking for a pound of flesh, fine. But guess what? Like, you chose to follow this path of, like, we want to be good. And then when somebody becomes available that we believe in, we're going to be willing to, like, chuck the boat at them, right? I don't think Embiid's going to become available, buddy. Like that, I think that ship sailed. I really do. And I don't care. I don't think Minnesota's playing out of their fucking minds right now. Like,
really?
If they make,
can you send the video of it?
But if you, but like you would think that if that team makes a second round, even a conference finals, like there's probably no chance. They'll probably just bite the bullet and figure out how to pay for the team, whatever it is. But I just can't see Cat going anywhere in that scenario. Okay, so and if even if you did trade for Cat, I mean the Cat Randle thing would be something to behold. But like, I don't know, man. Markkanen's 26. He's just entering his prime. He actually has played the three. He's played in big lineups and been effective in big lineups. He's a good defensive rebounder. I don't know. I just think that's kind of like kind of a no-brainer to me.
I'm kind of with you. I think another rated aspect of it too is just having another 7-footer. The kind of like mismatches you'll just create. Like imagine having to choose between putting your big wing on Randle or Lauri, and then like it just creates like those two would be able to play off each other so well. I believe. I think too. Another thing about Lauri was that when he was in Cleveland, they actually like weirdly had him do some like point of attack stuff, which he was actually pretty good at for like a guy his size.
He's
which
fluid.
I'm not saying. Yeah, he moves really well, which I'm not saying that he'd come to the Knicks and he's like this lockdown like defender that they needed, big wing defender. But I do think that there is something to be said about when a guy has proven to be like part of a good defense and is like actively contributing to that. I think it spells a lot that like he's probably like able to like raise up a level, especially like in a playoff environment. But yeah, I think Lauri Markkanen is the kind of guy that the Knicks should be looking at. He's a guy I'd be willing to go all in for just because you mentioned that he's like this really like low usage star. Just like all of his shots are coming like off the ball. He's not a guy who's like, yeah, give me my 20 touches a game. This is how I need to like create. And again, I think the aspect of him being 7 feet with that kind of like shot making ability, the way that like transforms the court, like you see it with Boston and how Porzingis has kind of like altered the like dimensions of the court for like that offense. I think Lauri kind of brings that same element in that sense too. And you can see how like
go ahead.
I'll finish it quickly. Just like how Utah has kind of like built their offense around like his movement and his ability to move at his size is a lot of fun as well.
Yeah, and like look, maybe that's something where Tibbs would need to definitely add some movement into the offense, but like you can't not get a quality player for like what he does. Like then it's on Tibbs, you know what I mean? Like then it's on Tibbs to bring the talent out. But the final thing I'll say, because I know we got to get out of here, is also that like if you get Markkanen, you actually like. I'm not saying you can fucking start Markkanen at the 5 and Randle at the 4, but like you have that option now of actually going 5 out. And when Randle is out, you don't necessarily lose size because you can just slot Markkanen in at the 4. So like I don't really see the downside of making some big all-in type trade for Markkanen is that you would be all in, right? Like, so like this is your team more or less. So now you're working the margins, but like, I don't actually, and I guess there's the debate of like, is that a championship team? Do you have a championship ceiling or whatever? It's a fair question to ask, but like, I think that team becomes really dangerous. If the trade is like, let's just say it's like RJ and all your picks and like you throw in Deuce McBride or some shit like that, like I think that team is very fucking dangerous as assembled right now. And I would suggest that you probably still have ability to make trades down the line with guys like DiVincenzo with his contract, Hart on his contract, Quickley, presumably if you kept him on his contract. Like, I think you still have options. So I would be fine with it. And I honestly think the Knicks should, like, I don't think these reports for Lauri Markkanen are out there for no reason. Like, if Utah really did not want to trade him at all, these reports wouldn't be out there. So if they're out there, I 100% believe that Danny Ainge would at least consider it. And maybe he just is watching the team this year and he thinks like their time horizon is just like way further out than he initially anticipated. I don't know. But yeah, I would definitely consider that. Though his injury stuff is a little bit concerning, although I'm not sure if some of that is like Utah soft tanking a lot of time, whatever. So we'll see. Stacy, any final thoughts?
No. Yeah, pretty much said it. I would be very interested. And the last thing I'll add is, like Markkanen also has some positional versatility, so you can play him. The defense is gonna be great, but you can play him 4 or 5 next to Randle, right? You can bring in another wing, or if you keep Grimes, you play him there. Keep a guy like Hart, and I think that's something that they're gonna need to have. And maybe it's just a Tibbs thing where your identity, but the thing beyond star powered stuff is the teams that win have multiple ways to attack and can shift their lineups, right? They have different ways to play you. And the Knicks are going to have to find some of those, whether or not they trade for a guy like Markkanen, just that versatility and having something in your back pocket, because you're going to play all kinds of teams in the playoffs. You're going to play teams that are going to make their own adjustments, right? We saw that with Spoelstra. I think that's another dimension that he offers as well.
Yeah. I was just going to add to that. I think that another thing, and this is kind of philosophical, I'll make it quick. It's just like, I think there is an issue with like the way that Randle and RJ both kind of like are very low, like stocks guys. They don't really like provide any kind of like weak side rim protection, like off the ball. I think that Lauri kind of does bring an element of like a weak side rim protector, and help that with his size. I'd love to see what that would look like if you have Mitch, for example, in this hypothetical lineup. Also having like a weak side rim protector next to him, which we've kind of never seen Mitch play with, I believe. Missing someone. But I think that'd be like a fun kind of element that would be able, that the Knicks could play around with. Yeah.
Look, I 100% agree with that. All right. Ariel, thank you so much for coming on. Let people know where they can find you and plug anything that you'd like to plug.
You guys can just follow me on Twitter at @PachecoNBA. I've been doing a little bit more writing lately on my Substack. Just write about like kind of whatever's on my mind at the time, or whatever's kind of like an interesting angle going on with the Knicks. But yeah, other than that, anything I'm doing is on my Twitter. So.
Awesome. Thank you, Ariel, again for coming on. And everybody should check out a Substack. Very good stuff on there. Stacy, let people know where they can find you. Plug anything you'd like to plug.
Stacy Patton 89. I'll plug all the great work at the Strickland. For those interested in the draft, I'll plug this again. Prez just dropped a piece on a look at some of the prospects that might be there. So if and when the Knicks make this big trade, I would imagine they will try to at least hold on to something in this draft, if possible, because they'll need to replenish. And as we've talked about, there are some places where they can beef up or add to the roster. So, and Prez is always great on the draft. So definitely check it out.
Yes, I will be checking that out. I have nothing to plug myself, so I'm going to just plug all the work at Strickland. Check out all the pods. Check out the work that Tyrese, Sam, and Jeff are doing on the rundown, the post-game shows. And check out the recaps that Miranda keeps, you drop some gems in there you'll never read from anywhere else. I promise you that. All right. That is our show for today. I hope everybody has a great week, and I will see you on Friday.